The camera is rolling, and this one's direct into camera.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lauren Zafrin. I'm a 5th grade teacher at Johnson Elementary School in Bethel, Connecticut. And today's lesson was lesson 2 of... Sorry, I have to start over.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Give me 1 second. Let me get this a little. Okay, go for it.
Hi, my name is Lauren Zafrin. I'm a 5th grade teacher at Johnson Elementary School in Bethel, Connecticut. Today's lesson was lesson 2 of a lesson on finding the sum of 2 fractions with different denominators.
Okay, perfect. Good work. Okay, so we are rolling. First question, we want to understand the decisions you made in planning for this lesson and how it fits into the unit and year. How does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge, what was taught before the lesson, and what will come after it?
This lesson fits into the curriculum of 5th grade because it is a major cluster area, numbers and operations and fractions. And within the scope and sequence of the year, this is the first unit on fractions. The students prior to this have had a pre-assessment to determine what understandings they have from 3rd and 4th grade. In 3rd grade, they began by naming fractions and drawing pictorial representations of fractions. As they went into 4th grade, they started to look at equivalent fractions, simplifying fractions, adding, subtracting fractions with like denominators. So this lesson kind of fits into that sequence because it's the next step, and so we did adding fractions with different denominators using their prior understanding from 3rd and 4th grade.
Good. Moving on, talk about the standards or cluster targeted in the lesson. What did you do to make the lesson reflect the full intent of that standard or cluster?
The targeted cluster and standards that this lesson exemplifies I need to start over because I don't like exemplify, sorry.
That's okay.
The targeted standard or cluster that this lesson shows is numbers and operations and fractions for 5th grade. The students are actually working on adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators, which is the cluster and standard. This lesson shows that standard in multiple ways. One way is the lesson is asking students to look at equivalent fractions to find common denominators and add and find sums. The other way is the standard actually asks that students are able to model and represent equivalent fractions. So it meets both the cluster and the standard.
Which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplified, and how did you plan for this?
Okay, sorry, I'm going to look and then I'll redo that one.
Okay, so we go like this.
Better. All right. So,
okay, we're rolling.
This lesson meets core action 1 because the lesson is within the cluster and grade level standards. It also meets core action 1 because I intentionally related prior concepts and understandings to the concepts in this lesson. And it's also part of core action 1 because the students are working on different parts of rigor. Fluency, the procedural skill is starting to develop, and also they're really developing conceptual understanding at the beginning of the lesson. The real-world application is something that I hope to develop further as the conceptual understanding becomes stronger. The second part, core action 2, is also met in this lesson. The students are working on grade level problems. They're also explaining their thinking and reasoning, justifying their work, which is all part of core action 2. Additionally, I'm, as a teacher, representing and modeling the use of the tools, but also how to conceptually understand equivalence and finding common denominators. So it meets core action 1 and core action 2 in those different indicators.
We're interested in how the shifts required by the CCSS are being incorporated into the classroom. Discuss how this lesson illustrates the shifts required by the CCSS.
The Common Core State Standard shifts for mathematics are focus, coherence, and rigor. This lesson meets these indicators because the lesson is focused on grade level standards and clusters. It also meets its focus and coherence. The lesson fits within not only this grade level and the scope and sequence, but also looking at the 3rd and 4th grade standards and clusters. Additionally, for rigor, it meets Some, but not all of those components. So in rigor, one of them is conceptual understanding. I think that's really what I'm building in this lesson. I am also trying to have the students apply it to real-world problems, and that's something that is more of an enrichment at this point for some of the students who are still developing conceptual understanding. And then in each lesson, I try to build in some fluency. So some of the techniques I use are just kind of asking them to say, give me 10, and I hold up five fingers, they have to hold up 2. So they're doing fact fluency there. But also, at the beginning of the lesson, I did a warm-up with multiplication and division. I don't know.
Okay. How did you teach the content of this lesson prior to the CCSS? What is the same and what's different?
Prior to the Common Core State Standards, this lesson had some similarities. There would have been concept development and trying to help students find equivalent fractions to add fractions with unlike denominators. I believe the Common Core State Standards and the shifts in mathematics really emphasize students' understanding and conceptual understanding and building their own knowledge, justifying their explanations. So the lesson has changed because students are really given more time to understand how to find equivalent fractions and then why they need common denominators. In the past, students would make errors because they didn't understand the meaning of common denominators, or they didn't understand how to come up with common denominators or even equivalent fractions.
Student engagement is crucial to the work of the CCSS. We want to understand how you ensured that all students had the opportunity to productively engage in the work of the lesson. How did the students handle this lesson? Did they understand the mathematics of the lesson? And how do you know?
This lesson addresses the needs of many different students. To make sure that all students were engaged in grade level problems, I had to pre-assess the unit before actually beginning it. And that gave me a good understanding of where students were in their development of their thinking. So in the pre-assessment, I asked students to name fractions. I asked students to identify different parts of fractions. Students also showed me if they were able to add and subtract fractions with like denominators, because I'm really building on that understanding and developing their next level, simplifying fractions and finding equivalents. So that was the first step, and that allowed me to make sure that I was able to let students access grade level problems. And some students you would see in the lesson were getting differentiated work. So some students were getting higher level thinking problems where they were really asking to apply their thinking and even create their own problem solving. Other students were still developing the conceptual understanding, but within the grade level cluster, students are allowed to model to add fractions with different denominators. So I think that all of the work was within the grade level cluster and standards.
Explain how you differentiated in this lesson. Did all students have opportunities to work on grade level content?
Can I answer
If
that?
all students did not have this opportunity, explain why.
I think that all students had the opportunity to work on grade level problems because I did, in planning the lesson, think about different students' needs. Some students were actually working on grade level problems, but more the conceptual understanding, so modeling it. Other students, although they began the previous lesson by modeling how to add fractions with different denominators, they started to see patterns and develop a deeper understanding of it. So they were actually able to then apply their knowledge. So students today applied their knowledge to create their own problems, real-world problems, and some of them were actually solving real-world problems. So all were accessing, but the differentiation that I provided and the opportunities for enrichment and Tier 1 intervention helped those students to do that at the appropriate level. Did I answer all parts of that? I'm not sure that I did.
Do you feel like we missed something?
What was the question? I'm sorry. I just
Explain how you differentiated. And
oh, how did all students? Yeah,
did
let me
they-
just.
I mean, I feel like you covered it. Do you have anything you
I was just going to add one
Yeah, go
piece.
for it.
All students were able to handle the grade level problems. There were some students who, because of behavioral or emotional needs, did need a little bit of different prompting or cueing. So that's something that you'd see in a classroom, and it's just a different form of differentiation. I'm not differentiating the content, but I'm differentiating how they access it.
Which behaviors from Core Action 3 did the students best exemplify in this lesson?
Just make sure.
Still going.
In Core Action 3, the students best exemplified in this lesson their ability to justify their work, explain their reasoning. They also were able to show that they could work with others to question their ideas and explain their thinking to their peers, which Core Action 3 is really about the understanding piece and being able to explain your understanding. So I think that in Core Action 3, the students really developed their ability to communicate, to explain reasoning, justifying their work. That's something that we've been working on this year. Some students still have a difficult time summarizing and completing their thoughts, but it's something that we're moving towards and working as a goal for.
Would you like to comment on any of the submitted student work?
The student work for this lesson shows different levels that students were working on. So not all students completed all of the assignments. They were targeted for what that student needed at the time. The student work, I was really excited to see that some students are beginning to look for multiple solutions, which is also in Core Action 3. Additionally, I was happy to see that students are really able to apply their reasoning and their ability to add fractions with different denominators to a real-world problem. A lot of students surprised me in their ability to be creative and actually think of different ways that the fractions could apply to real-world situations.
Great instructors are continuously learning. We want to understand what you celebrated in this lesson and what you would improve upon. Reflecting on the lesson, what worked well and what might you do differently?
In this lesson, I really wanted to celebrate the students who came up with creative problems that involved fractions and really adding the fractions with different denominators, because in the end, the goal is that they can apply their reasoning and their understanding to solve real-world problems in that application piece. So I really wanted to celebrate students who thought of ways in their life or in an interest area of their own that they could celebrate, their thinking and their ability to actually use addition of fractions with unlike denominators to solve a real world problem. I think something that I would do differently in this lesson is I think some of the tiered intervention that I was trying to provide in class might need to be done prior to the lesson. Their understanding on their pre-assessment showed me that they understood addition of fractions with like denominators and naming fractions, representing fractions. Fourth grade standard is also to work on simplifying and equivalent fractions. I felt as though some of the students had not really grasped that concept, and I would have liked to intervene maybe before this lesson so that they would have that base understanding and be able to apply the knowledge more comfortably in the lesson.
Were there any surprises or unexpected student behaviors or...
We'll wait for that to be done.
Let me pause. Okay. Were there any surprises or unexpected student behaviors or reactions?
The student behaviors in the classroom are things that I typically see. I have several students with different learning needs and different learning disabilities. So behavioral concerns were just students that typically have some behavioral needs. Cueing or prompting is often needed. I have two students who emotionally need some support, and that's something that as a teacher you deal with within the lesson. So it wasn't a surprise, but it's something that each day you have to kind of change your lesson to meet the needs of all the students.
Room tone.
Okay.
So this is room tone.